Chapter 706, Abyss Awakening. More berserkers gathered outside Eastern Wasteland's tower. When Xianxia and the rest also arrived, they saw that there were already no less than hundreds of thousands of berserkers gathered outside Eastern Wasteland's tower. And there were even more berserkers that were charging towards the place from all directions in the sky. The breathing and zealousness from those hundreds of thousands of people had turned into a shocking presence. This presence was like the stars surrounding the moon that was Eastern Wasteland's tower. A wave of madness that was enough to terrify all races erupted from their bodies. The source of their madness was their blood, and the reason for their blood falling into madness was the ninth light circle in the sky. That blood-red light circle contained Su Ming's understanding, and it was a murderous will that even the epiphany left behind by the first god of berserkers could not fight against. The murderous aura surrounded the entire land of berserkers, and there were even some excited roars stirred up by Su Ming's light circle within Yin Death Vortex, which was now hidden away by the newly returned blue sky. Many roars reverberated in the air. Some of the ferocious beasts inside even looked as if they were about to rush out of the fog. They lingered about the edge, but they managed to control themselves and did not truly rush into the land of berserkers. As the fog tumbled about, the three old voices within the depths of the fog were also roaring. It's that boy's presence. That's right, it's his presence. It's the presence that belongs to this generation's god of berserkers. This is a blood-red murderous will. What shocking murderous will. I can even see that blood-red world within this murderous will. What a beautiful world. I like this boy. I like people who have this sort of murderous aura. If I knew he was like this, I wouldn't have let those damn immortals take him away all those years ago. I would have brought him into Yin Death's holy land and made him a sacred child within Yin Death region. At the same time these three voices roared, an incredibly domineering divine will that was even older than theirs and located deeper within Yin Death fog charged towards them while sweeping up the fog around the area before pushing down on the three divine senses. Shut up. There was a murderous aura contained within the old voice. When it reverberated in the air, the three divine senses instantly fell dead silent. I can sense a familiar ripple of power from his body. It's the ripple of power that belongs to the promise Xianxia made with Yin Death World all those years ago. It's the call for evil spirits guards and surging indulgers murderous fiends. That ripple of power is still not powerful. Observe him constantly. When that ripple of power has become strong enough to call for us, bring him immediately to see me. That boy Xianxia brought Yin Death World's mission with him when he left, and he was supposed to help us find the path that led to the fifth great true world. As for us, we were supposed to listen to the orders of the one who could bring up these ripples. But Xianxia had not said that the one who will be causing these ripples would just be one person. He had been talking about all the berserkers gathering together. It's slightly off his predictions. Regardless, after Xianxia left, the ripples of the call for the promise had only come from this person. Then, it must be him. Yin Death fog tumbled about violently as the old man spoke. There were two other vortices within the depths of the fog. These two vortices were still and did not move. They were hidden deep and were appearing vaguely as the fog tumbled about. There seemed to be a continent lying within one of those still vortices. The ground in that continent was black, and even the sky there was dark. Occasionally, red bolts of lightning would flash by the sky and illuminate the world so that it would be slightly more visible, allowing people to be able to somewhat see that there were 100,000 people in black armor sitting cross-legged on that continent. These people were sitting with closed eyes and looked as if they had been asleep for several years. They were all about 30 feet tall and there were ferocious faces of malicious spirits on their countenances. These faces all looked like masks. If Su Ming was there, he would immediately be able to sense clearly that the presence spreading out from their bodies belonged to evil spirits, which he had managed to master when he was within the first 8 layers of Eastern Wasteland's tower. There was also a continent within the other still vortex. However, the earth in that continent was crimson red, and it was the same for its sky, but occasionally, black bolts of lightning would appear, submerging the land in darkness. There were also 100,000 people sitting cross-legged on the ground there with their eyes shut, wearing red armor. Any person would be able to see that their bodies were all just skin and bones. Waves of red light surrounded them, making them look incredibly bizarre. They were the surging indulgers. Since ancient times, the warriors of these two races had lain dormant in these places and continued sleeping within the vortices. They waited for the day the person who could wake them up would arrive. At the instant the blood-red light from Eastern Wasteland's tower's 9th layer reverberated in the air throughout the land of berserkers and sent Su Ming's will to all corners of the world, the eyes of the 200 warriors within the two vortices fluttered, as if they were about to open their eyes. However, the call from the promise was still incredibly weak. That was why after that light fluttering, their eyes fell shut once more. As the light circle from Eastern Wasteland's tower swept through the world of berserkers, as berserkers who numbered to more than hundreds of thousands worshipped in zealous order, and as golden light flashed at the center of Eastern Wasteland's tower's 1st layer, Su Ming appeared. His whole body was filled with a murderous aura. His understanding towards making his heart no longer be in a state of stillness and his desire for autumn had caused a tremendous change within him once he left the 9th layer. There was no outsider interfering with this change, neither was there any other beings offering any sort of guidance. This was Su Ming's own understanding, and it was born of his own will. Autumn's color, Su Ming licked his lips. A strange and enchanting glare appeared in his eyes, and he walked slowly towards the killing sword. As he closed in on the blade, it immediately started shuddering, as if it had sensed that there was something off about Su Ming. It could sense that the person seemed to have transformed into somebody else compared to his past self. Su Ming's murderous will far surpassed the killing sword's own, and it let out a mournful whistle as it shuddered. Su Ming lifted his right hand and slowly took hold of the sword's hilt. "I'll ask you one last time, will you submit to me?" The killing sword trembled viciously in Su Ming's hands. Golden light flashed on the blade, and blue light emerged, then transformed into a small blue humanoid. That small humanoid was incredibly weakened, and once it appeared, it looked at Su Ming with terrified eyes. It could sense that even though Su Ming did not seem incredibly powerful right then, there was a presence around him that made even the sword's spirit tremble. That presence made it seem as if this person had awakened the unknown. "You are a killing sword. You should love killing, but all your slaughter is for death. All your slaughter is a form of worship towards death, and I symbolize death," Su Ming stated languidly. At that instant, his spirit seemed to have risen, causing that awakened presence which made the sword tremble to become even stronger. At the same time, at the spot where Su Ming's physical body was located at the center of the endless continents surrounding him in multiple layers, a wave of death abruptly erupted from his physical body with a bang. The outburst of that presence made the sharp needles that had sunk deep into the body to be pushed out a little, as if they could not contain that presence in his body. The hearts of all powerful warriors in the land of immortals shuddered at that instant. Long arcs charged forth and relocation runes were activated. Everyone was rushing towards the place where Su Ming's body was located. Abyss Awakening. This is Abyss Awakening. An old man with a head full of white hair stepped into a relocation rune with terror on his face. Chapter 707, Exiting the Tower. At the time many immortals rushed towards the large number of floating continents in the galaxy using various methods. The corpse that had given Su Ming an incredibly strong feeling lying on the altar suddenly erupted with a presence that made all the immortals anxious. The sharp needles on the corpse were crawling out madly, and by the looks of it, they would soon charge out of the body completely, resulting in no seal being able to hold down the corpse. A strange mark appeared at the center of the corpse's brows. That mark looked like a dried-up leaf, but as it shone, it gave off a false impression that it was about to regain its life force. Cracking sounds rang in the air as lines appeared on the altar. Those cracks were spreading in all directions, until they covered the whole ground. As the corpse's presence grew stronger, a bang rang in the air, and nearly a third of the needles in the corpse were forced out, shattering into dust in midair. Right at the moment more needles were about to be forced out, long arcs arrived next to the corpse, and light from runes shone beside it. Some people had even torn space itself to reach it. There were 9 people who arrived. These people had either arrived in the form of long arcs, via relocation, or had torn through space. They were shrouded by fog and their faces could not be seen clearly, but at the time they closed in on the corpse, all of them let out a shout at the same time. The shouts by these people turned into a wave of sound that surged towards the corpse. The 9 people then lifted their right hands and formed a seal before pushing at 9 different spots on the corpse. At the same time, a violent shudder wrecked through these 9 people's bodies when they started suppressing the corpse. While these immortals were doing so, more people continuously arrived to the area around Eastern Wasteland's tower. They numbered between 400,000 to 500,000, and they were kneeling around the area and worshipping the tower that was shining with the light circles. Su Ming stood calmly within Eastern Wasteland's tower and held the killing sword in his right hand. There was an indifferent expression on his face, but there was a terrifying wave of murderous intent that was erupting continuously from the depths of his soul. The killing sword trembled violently in his hand. The awakened presence that terrified it eventually made it let out a submissive cry. As that cry echoed in the air, the final sliver of blue light disappeared, and once it was completely replaced by golden light, the sword let out a piercing light in Su Ming's hand. Su Ming let go of the hilt and pointed towards the killing sword. It instantly charged towards his right index finger, turning smaller as it came and making it seem as if there was golden light surrounding Su Ming's right index finger. When that golden light scattered away after a moment, a sharp golden nail was added to the tip of the fingernail. At that moment, after being pushed into an incredibly pathetic state that he had even spared no pains in lighting his soul on fire more than a year ago, Su Ming made the sword submit to him. By borrowing the awe-inspiring might of Eastern Wasteland's tower, he had managed to do so using the awakening of his soul after he understood the bloody meaning behind autumn, as well as managing to gain a hazy notion of something. "I like red," Su Ming whispered softly, then lifted his right hand and pushed against the door of Eastern Wasteland's tower. With it, booming sounds came from the gate, and it slowly swung open. At the moment it opened, an endless amount of golden light charged out and shook the entire land. During that instant, excited roars came into the tower from the world outside. Su Ming walked out calmly. When he moved out of Eastern Wasteland's tower enveloped by the golden light, he saw an endless amount of excited berserkers. His statue of the god of berserkers manifested in midair at that time, the 10,000 feet statue appearing erect in the world. The presence of life cultivation spread out from it, the mighty pressure that made all the berserkers' blood boil, and it told all of the berserkers one thing: Su Ming was the god of berserkers they had been searching for over the past year. Greeting, god of berserkers. Greeting, god of berserkers. Greeting, god of berserkers. The rise and fall of the voices that belonged to the 400,000 to 500,000 people fused together, turning into a shocking roar and the berserker's will. It became the berserker's soul, and as it reverberated in the air, all the people shouted at the top of their lungs. The excited cries could intimidate even the heavens themselves, bring the earth to submission, cause hearts to shake, and make souls roar. Su Ming stood outside Eastern Wasteland's tower silently and looked at all the excited eyes staring at him. Roars that surged into the sky reached his ears. Within this wave of sound and amid the berserker's excitement, a strange form of resonance gradually took shape, tying his heart together with these people. This resonance was a feeling that could not be described with words. It was as if Su Ming could make these people move with just one word. Even if he wanted them to blast the sky open, they would not hesitate to do so. It was as if Su Ming was their god at this instant. Or perhaps not just for this instant but for all eternity. Su Ming closed his eyes. After a moment, the waves of sound traveling into his ears increased, and they showed no sign of stopping. When they grew so loud as if they were about to turn the world upside down, he opened his eyes and slowly said, "I want to slaughter my way to the immortals' territory." His voice was not loud, but even in the mid of the roars let out by the 400,000 to 500,000 people, his voice still spread in all directions and reverberated over the whole land. As his voice traveled forth, all the berserkers in the area, including the old men like Xianxia and Xianxia, found themselves unable to contain their excitement. "Slaughter our way to the immortals' territory." This was the cry shared by all the people in the land. Their merged voices could terrify even ghosts and deities, and they could make all living beings tremble because of it. "I want to kill all immortals in the land of berserkers." Su Ming swung his arm, and his voice grew slightly louder. "Kill all immortals in the land of berserkers." All the berserkers in the area stood up and shouted at the sky. A crazed killing intent erupted from their bodies at that instant. "I want to dye the immortals' galaxy red." Su Ming took a step forward and rose swiftly in midair. As his voice spread out, he was answered by the crazed roars of the 400,000 to 500,000 berserkers. "Dye the immortals' galaxy red." Roars that surpassed the cries of thunder gathered together like a sword that was drawn out of its scabbard. It gathered the berserker's uprisal and charged into the sky to stir the heavens. It even made all the ferocious spirits in yin death fog fall silent. At that instant, as those people shrouded by fog suppressed Su Ming's physical body at the center of all the floating continents in the Immortals galaxy, another third of all the needles charged out of his body and exploded in midair. It made the 9 people suppressing him cough up blood. As they tumbled backwards, all of them let out low growls and forced their bodies to stop moving back. At the instant they moved to suppress the corpse once again, 9 distorted illusions appeared behind them. Projections of a world could be seen within the distorted illusions behind each of these people. Those were worlds from 9 directions, and within each world, an endless number of immortals could be seen meditating. They were offering up all their power and sending it through the projected illusions. Send out my orders and tell the immortals in other 9 worlds to suppress the change in Destiny's physical body. If they don't send someone soon and suppress him, the 9 of us will not be able to handle him. One of the 9 let out a low shout as they all borrowed the powers of their worlds to suppress Su Ming's physical body, preventing the needles in his body from being able to leave his flesh. Almost at the same time, these 9 people suppressed the corpse once again. Shocking roars echoed through eastern wastelands. As the 400,000 to 500,000 people howled, Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the sky while standing beside Eastern Wasteland's tower. His gaze seemed to be able to see through the sky and yin death region, making him able to see the Immortals galaxy, which existed beyond the mirror. I am the god of berserkers. I will lead all berserkers and dye the immortal sky red with their blood. Su Ming did not just say these words, but lifted his head and roared them at the sky. With it, all the berserkers in the area did the same thing and let out roars that shook the sky. All their wills were gathered on Su Ming at that instant, and he had a feeling that he could fuse with the world of berserkers. As some part of his soul awakened, as he understood the meaning of autumn, and as the berserkers were fused together, Su Ming's cultivation base erupted with a bang. Once that happened, red gradually appeared in the sky. The rivers on the ground seemed to have also been dyed by that color during that instant and gained a red glow. At the spot where Su Ming's physical body was, once his cultivation base erupted, all the needles that had sunk into him once again due to the suppression shuddered, looking as if they wanted to surge out. The expressions on the 9 people's faces changed drastically where they stood around the body. At that moment, a tyrannical and powerful divine sense came charging forward with a bang, tearing through space to appear right above Su Ming's physical body. Whoever it was lifted his or her right hand and pushed down swiftly. Soon after, a divine sense with an ancient and old presence charged through the torn space and pushed down on Su Ming's physical body. If anyone took a look here, then they would see that there were nearly 100 immortals who had gathered around to suppress the sealed body, and all of them possessed incredibly powerful might. As the light from the runes shone, a divine sense that surpassed that of all the divine senses belonging to the people in the area tore through space from somewhere and arrived with a bang, suppressing Su Ming's physical body. Abyss awakening? HMPH. Even if he awakened, he would still have to forever pay tribute to us immortals. Under the suppression from the various powerful and mighty presences among the immortals as well as some ancient existences, Su Ming's physical body gradually calmed down. The mark of the dried leaf at the center of his brows disappeared, and he stopped moving. Su Ming could not sense any of what happened in the land of immortals while he remained in the land of berserkers. However, at the moment his body was finally suppressed, he felt as if a huge stone was pressed down against his heart, and his hate for all immortals erupted forth even greater than before. He had a strong feeling that there was only a little left before his cultivation base would move into the middle stage of life matrix. This sliver of difference would need the world to run crimson, requiring an endless amount of blood and lives. Chapter 708. Destroy the Sect. Su Ming no longer attempted to clear the other layers of Eastern Wasteland's tower. He left seeking the answer for the things after the 9th layer to the future, because he had far too many things he needed to do at the moment and did not have the time to stay in the tower. By his predictions, if he wanted to gain a complete epiphany towards Eastern Wasteland's tower, not only would he require a level of cultivation higher than his current one, he would also need an endless amount of time. Su Ming's murderous aura filled his entire being. He wanted to turn the sky red and see autumn to verify his epiphany so that he could enter the middle stage of life matrix. As the 400,000 to 500,000 berserkers roared around him, Su Ming cast a glance at the land in the distance. His Artman filled the area, but he was only looking for one thing. It was his eldest senior brother's statue, located at the spot where the immortals descended. That statue was kept in perfect condition at its original spot. There was also Su Ming's protection on that statue, which he had left in secret as he escaped from the killing sword. Su Ming did not believe that his eldest senior brother would just die like this. He absolutely refused to believe it. In silence, Su Ming averted his gaze. He did not dare to take his eldest senior brother away, because he was uncertain. He did not know whether his actions would bring more harm to his eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother, I'll make you wake up. Su Ming lifted his head. When he swept his gaze past fated kin, he nodded, then looked towards the world in the distance. As he spread his Artman outwards, he found an immortal sect located in that direction, Sky Mist Dao. This was the biggest sect Sky Mist Dao had in the land of berserkers. It was also their base within the land of berserkers. The sect had currently entered seclusion and activated all their great runes, which covered an area of several hundreds of thousands of lees, making the area into an incredibly powerful defense. It would be difficult for berserkers to move even half an inch forward through the area of the rune, but the people of Sky Mist Dao could also not venture out. Come with me, to destroy the immortal sects in the land of berserkers. Our first target is Sky Mist Dao. Su Ming waved his arm, and his voice spread through the whole area in waves. All the berserkers who heard his words felt their blood boiling. Their eyes turned crimson red, and they let out hoarse roars. They had been waiting for this day for far too long, and now it had finally arrived. Under the lead of their god of berserkers, Su Ming, they would sweep through all the immortal sects in the land of berserkers, and make their land become a forbidden ground for immortals from then onwards. Qian Qi, Xue Shuo, Kai Lei Qian, and the others were the group whose level of cultivation were the highest besides Su Ming. They had witnessed his fight against Di Qian and saw the immortals' relocation rune shatter. At that moment, when they saw Su Ming walking out of Eastern Wasteland's tower and heard his words wanting to destroy all immortal sects in the land of berserkers, they flew up without hesitation and wrapped their fists in their palms before Su Ming, worshipping him. We are all willing to obey the god of berserkers' will and are willing to follow the god of berserkers to destroy the immortals. We will follow the god of berserkers and destroy the immortals. The same words escaped the mouths of all berserkers in the area in the form of crazed roars. Long arcs shot up from the ground and charged into the sky. Those long arcs belonged to the 400,000 to 500,000 people flying upwards at the same time, and this was a scene that was striking enough to shock all those who saw it. Su Ming cast a glance at Qian Qi and the others before he took a step towards the sky in the distance. He turned into a long arc and flew right in front of everyone. Qian Qi and the others followed swiftly behind, and right behind them was Su Ming's fated kin. With Nan Gonghen as their leader, they followed closely behind their respected senior Mo. Right at the end were the 400,000 to 500,000 berserkers. With a presence that covered the sky, they turned into brilliant arcs that caused a huge shadow to fall on the ground. As they charged forward, they followed Su Ming and rushed towards Sky Mist Dao. Time passed swiftly. The flight of 500,000 people stirred up a huge gust of wind that swept through the world. An endless amount of sand and stone on the ground was swept up. The layers of clouds in the sky were torn apart before they could even get close to the crowd. In the mid of all the moaning sounds from wind that was stirred up due to the charge, the crowd landed right above Sky Mist Dao after a day. Sky Mist Dao was one of the immortal sects in Eastern Wastelands, and it occupied a territory of hundreds of thousands of lees. There were 18 mountains located inside this territory, and there was an innumerable amount of beautiful towers on each of these mountains. They could accommodate hundreds of thousands of disciples to train within them, and a large circular rune was located on the ground with these 18 mountains as a basis. The rune could absorb the spiritual aura from the world so that immortals could continue training. It was especially so right then. Once all the runes in Sky Mist Dao were activated, a thick layer of fog filled the area around it, surrounding the place, and lightning arcs could be seen flashing inside. There were also low growls echoing inside that fog, giving off an air that it did not welcome any forms of life inside. The fog covered an area of several hundreds of thousands of lees. Besides lightning flashes and low growls, There was also a brilliant light flashing inside that fog. It was the second layer of Sky Mist Dao's mountain protection rune, Ultimate Barrier. Not only were Sky Mist Dao disciples required to manage the activation of this ultimate barrier, it also needed the rune on the ground to continuously absorb spiritual aura from the ground, supplying itself with the necessary amount of spiritual aura. South Morning's Sky Mist Barrier was the shrunken version of this ultimate barrier. There were also Sky Mist's immortal guards inside this ultimate barrier. All of these immortal guards were puppets that would obey any command, even if it was for them to self-destruct. There was a third rune within Sky Mist Dao, right behind that ultimate barrier. That rune's name was Four Sacred Skies. It was one of the core mountain protection runes in Sky Mist Dao. Within it were the four great laws of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, and they could destroy all those who tried to trespass with brute force. Besides Four Sacred Skies, Sky Mist Dao had one final rune, and that was Four Seasons Destruction. The passage of time contained within the spring, summer, autumn, and winter was embedded within this rune, and with the lives of all the disciples in Sky Mist Dao as its foundation, it would make the life of the person who moved into the rune take a turn for the worse by speeding up his life cycle. After all, even if there were only 10,000 Sky Mist disciples offering a year of their lives, there would still be 10,000 years contained within the rune, and to many people, these 10,000 years meant that they would immediately become old, turning into skeletons once they stepped into the Four Seasons Destruction. As the 500,000 long arcs charged through the world beyond Sky Mist Dao and stirred up a huge gust of wind, they swept up an endless amount of sand that crashed into that thick fog around Sky Mist Dao before they even got close. At the instant sand and fog crashed into each other, shocking booming sounds echoed in the air. Hasty bell chimes immediately traveled through the entire Sky Mist Dao. At the instant the disciples within the 18 mountains heard the bell chimes, their expressions changed, no matter what they were doing. The ground trembled due to that booming sound, and the 18 mountains shuddered together. Long arcs flew up and turned into dozens of people in midair. None of these people had low levels of cultivation, but they were all looking at the sky with pale faces. The berserkers have come. Maintain the runes at full power. No matter what cost, do not let the berserkers break through Sky Mist Dao's runes. All those within Sky Mist Dao, listen well. If you fall into the hands of berserkers, you will definitely die. Instead of that, it is better to tie your lives to Sky Mist Dao. Besides, there is a possibility that they will not be able to break our runes. We still have hope. I've already contacted our sect in the Land of Immortals once more. If we persevere, then we will have a chance to live. Low shouts that contained either brusque or gentle words reverberated through Sky Mist Dao, and they were all trying to curb the panic among the disciples. Yet a violent bang that sounded as if it was right beside everyone's ears traveled through Sky Mist Dao from the area outside. That sound caused the 18 mountains to shake so much that crushed stones started rolling down. Sky Mist Dao's disciples shuddered so much that many of them started bleeding from their eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. The first layer of our runes has been broken. A piercing scream shot out among the disciples. At the instant all people turned their gazes towards the sky, they saw a young man clad in armor and surrounded entirely by black smoke. With long hair that was black with a tinge of purple, he stood in the sky and sliced down with the sword in his hand. When he did so, an endless amount of thick fog let out a loud bang and tumbled backwards like seawater before disintegrated altogether. With the killing sword in hand, Su Ming pointed towards Sky Mist Dao, which was now lacking that thick fog. Kill them! As he roared, the berserkers who had arrived continuously behind him charged madly towards Sky Mist Dao's second layer of defense. As the fog was torn apart and continued tumbling backwards to reveal Sky Mist Dao, not only did all the disciples in the sect see Su Ming, they also saw the hundreds of thousands of berserkers behind him. They also saw the other berserkers behind the initial hundreds of thousands, whose sheer numbers blotted out the sky and earth, and who were packed so densely together that an end to them could not be seen. All of the berserkers' eyes were crimson red, and they were all shining with madness and a hatred towards immortals that was engraved deep within their bones. Wu La stood at the second mountain with a pale face. As she looked at Su Ming and all the berserkers outside the rune in the sky, her expression changed. Slowly, the complicated look on her face disappeared and was replaced by a sigh. She tightly wrapped her fingers around a pair of bells in her hand. Qian Lan Yu's face was also pale as she stood on another mountain, but there was an endless amount of cold spreading out from her. She kept her gaze fixed on Su Ming while another woman stood quietly right next to her. That woman was Qian Lan Meng. She looked at Su Ming in the sky, and all the memories of the past surfaced in her head. Their initial meeting all those years ago and their journey together as they harbored some fondness for each other. But those possible beautiful moments that might have existed turned to dust due to their separation because of the great war between the shamans and berserkers. Her hesitation after they reunited in the world of berserkers caused her to be unable to forget the grief and understanding that had appeared on Su Ming's face at that time. Is it fated? Qian Lan Meng bit her bottom lip, and tears fell from her eyes. As the 500,000 people charged forward from beyond Sky Mist Dao, Su Ming held the killing sword in his hand and walked towards the second layer of defense. At the same time, in a forest far away from this spot, located near Evil Spirit Sect, Chen Chen found himself lying on the ground and continuing to fake death once again. There was an incredibly beautiful woman in front of him. She was blinking rapidly while eating roasted seeds in her hand and throwing the seed skins on the ground. There was a huge yellowish-brown dog beneath her. That dog was sticking out its tongue lazily and sweeping up those seed skins before swallowing them. The old man that was really the bald crane was putting on the air of a powerful person and an unfathomable demeanor, as if he was afraid that other people did not know that he was a veteran, and he was chatting away with the woman. Are you saying that this god of berserkers, Su Ming, is your disciple? The woman's eyes went wide, and she put on a naive expression. There was a look of idolization on her beautiful, petite face. I'll have to correct you, Lasserie. That Su Ming is not my disciple. His father is my disciple in name. So in all, that boy Su Ming could call me his granduncle master. There is nothing I don't know about him. What do you want to know? I can tell you, the old man stated, after a small cough. Chapter 709, A Pot of Meat. How old is that god of berserkers this year? The woman blinked and looked at the old man before her with a smile, then placed a seed in her mouth and bit down on it. Others might not know about Su Ming, but I know him too well, As the old man who was actually the transformed bald crane continued chattering away, the huge yellow dog under the woman's feet cast a sideways glance at him before shaking its head. There was a look of pity and compassion on its face when it sashayed its way to Qian Chen, who was pretending to be dead by the side. As it walked around Qian Chen's body, the yellow mutt stuck out its nose and sniffed him carefully before sticking out its tongue to lick his face a few times. A large amount of slob fell down on Qian Chen's face, but he did not dare move. He could not help but find his heart racing against his chest. He kept his eyes shut tight, but he could still smell the stench coming from that wet tongue. But this was not even the main point. He was actually a person who had descended to the land of berserkers, and while he was not an immortal, he still had some unique divine abilities. None of them were offensive, but he could somewhat see through the true form of certain objects. This divine ability was well liked by the younger disciples of his race, and it was an art they had to have when they wanted to travel around worlds. This divine ability would let them find many treasures that other people could not find and allow them to seem as if they possessed insight. In fact, there were some direct connections between this divine ability and the reason why Qian Chen had been able to use a unique method to descend to the land of berserkers. When he first ran into the bald crane, he had used this divine ability and saw that the person he was looking at was actually a transformed bird. The bald crane had then introduced itself as Old Crane, and that was why Qian Chen constantly addressed it as Grandpa Crane and Sir Crane. Only then did the bald crane see how clever he was and dragged him in as its companion. At that moment, as that mutt continued licking Qian Chen with its tongue, his heart trembled. He had a feeling that there was something off about this mutt. That stench from its mouth made him instinctively execute his divine ability and push his mind slightly outward to look towards the mutt beside him. Qian Chen was left stunned after his glance. He even opened his eyes wide to look at the mutt in shock. What he saw with his art was no mutt but a yellow dragon. And it was a dragon with an incredibly ferocious look. At that moment, the dragon was looking at him and sticking out its huge tongue to lick his face. A large amount of dragon saliva fell on him, and in Qian Chen's eyes, the yellow dragon seemed as if it wanted to swallow him whole. There was nothing else that could drive Qian Chen into more despair than an evil dragon licking him. Under this extreme terror, his eyes rolled upwards and he fell unconscious. This time, he truly fainted. However, before he was knocked out, he could still hear the bald crane's ancient voice ringing in his ears. Lasse, there are too many things regarding the god of Berserkers past. I feel thirsty after saying so much. By the way, why are your parents not here yet? We already made a promise that if you wanted to make a powerful warrior like me join your side, you would need to bring someone who has equal status to me here so that we could negotiate. Oh well, I'm a little hungry now. How about this? That mutt seems quite fat. Why don't you kill that mutt and make a pot of braised meat? These were the bald crane's words Xianxia heard before he fainted. It was also why Xianxia fell unconscious very happily and in a very straightforward manner. At that time, booming sounds surged into the sky in a place where Sky Mist Dao was located. They reverberated in all directions in a manner that was deafening to the ears, causing the land of Sky Mist Dao to tremble and cracks to appear in the sky. 500,000 people had surrounded Sky Mist Dao. The murderous aura and madness spreading from their bodies turned into something that practically had corporeal form, and it was squashing down the 18 mountains that were protected by Sky Mist Dao's runes. The mighty pressure was something that this sect could not hope to resist. Even if they put up some resistance, it would shatter instantly under this pressure. The wills of those 500,000 people had fused together and turned into a wave of madness that could destroy everything. Kai Lei Qian and the others followed right behind Su Ming as he traveled at the forefront. At that moment, even though there were mixed feelings within Kai Lei Qian's heart, he did not harbor any thoughts to take back the lightning crystal from Su Ming. In truth, when he first saw him at the spot where immortals descended a year ago, he had been able to recognize that this was the person from South Morning that he had planned to torture to death. He was the person who had snatched away half of his lightning crystal, and Kai Lei Qian had sent his divine sense over to say all those heinous and brutal words. When he noticed that Su Ming was that person, all sorts of feelings had arisen within his heart, and he had given up on his misery. In fact, he felt incredibly regretful over the brutal words he had said in the beginning. As all those mixed feelings battled in his heart, he saw Su Ming giving off the presence that was so powerful it could almost suffocate a person, and Kai Lei Qian showed off his abilities without care for any risk to himself. In his eyes, this was perhaps the only method for him to not have Su Ming come causing trouble for him. With a calm expression on his face, Su Ming took a step forward, and the fog that was the first layer of Sky Mist Dao's rune tumbled backwards before him to reveal the second rune, which was a gigantic screen of light known as the Ultimate Barrier. That screen of light surrounded the entire Sky Mist Dao. In fact, if anyone looked at it for a longer period of time, they would find that it was not a single, thin layer but consisted multiple layers that formed a barrier in the shape of a city wall, and it was protecting Sky Mist Dao within it. There was also an endless amount of spiritual aura spreading out from the ground to fuse into the barrier so that it could continue to operate. In fact, every 100 feet, a Sky Mist Dao disciple could be vaguely seen sitting cross-legged, resulting in the defensive prowess of the second barrier to be greater than that of the first layer. There were also nearly 100 powerful presences on that rune. Each of these presences possessed great power, but they had no intelligence. They were all puppets that existed because of the rune. They could not leave Sky Mist Dao. They could only survive around the barrier, and were the best defensive force. Break it, Su Ming stated flatly once he swept his gaze across the guards of that ultimate barrier. As his words traveled through the sky, Kai Lei Qian and the others immediately charged towards the barrier. At the same time, the 400,000 to 500,000 people around them hurled a punch at the ultimate barrier as they roared and continued spreading out the mighty pressure from their bodies. In Su Ming's eyes, there was no skill required to break Sky Mist Dao's rune. There was no need for him to understand how the rune operated, and neither was there any need for him to think about how to dodge it. They only needed one punch. With a punch thrown together by 500,000 people, with a forceful and incredibly violent manner, they would break open this barrier with brute force. This was a punch of an upfront manner. The punch's berserkers gathered together the power of the hundreds of thousands of people, and the resulting attack seemed like a savage, crazed dragon that was charging towards the wall, which was known as Sky Mist Dao's ultimate barrier. Nearly 100 golden flashes of light shone, and the puppets appeared. As they came into contact with the power gathered together by the hundreds of thousands of berserkers, a bang shook the skies, and the puppets turned into dust, were instantly wiped off. They could not stop the berserkers for even a moment, allowing the crazed dragon that was formed by the power of the hundreds of thousands of berserkers to crash into the ultimate barrier. A loud booming sound surged into the air and spread through a small half of eastern wastelands. The barrier that was formed by the screen of light let out a scream of its inability to withstand the force that had just rammed into it. As it shattered inch by inch, the thousands of Sky Mist Dao disciples sitting on the barrier and defending it fell backwards, crumbling. As the booming sound echoed in the air, the barrier shattered. Fourth god of berserkers, even if you destroy Sky Mist Dao today, there will come a day where we immortals will descend en masse and destroy all of you. A shrill roar came from the crumbled barrier, and it belonged to an old man. There was little of his body left, but there was an endless amount of hatred within his voice. Are the number of berserkers you immortals killed small? After the first god of berserkers left, you cruelly tore our second god of berserkers, sealed Great U Imperial City, and sent a large amount of immortals to purge us berserkers. More than hundreds of millions of berserkers had died by your hands throughout the ages. Immortals must die. My tribe and my family were all slaughtered by immortals, and it was all so that they could create a single drop of berserker blood. All my children died in the hands of immortals. To me, you've already destroyed my bloodline. So I'll make all of you pay. I'm the only one left of my tribe now, and it was all because my tribe was located on a spirit mine. Voices rose up in the form of roars in answer to the old man's words. They were the voices belonging to the hundreds of thousands of berserkers in the area. They were filled with their hatred and their madness towards the immortals. This was a war between two races. Perhaps there were people who had never dyed their hands in either of the races' blood in this war, but even so, in this war where one side must be destroyed, they could only go with the flow, and slowly, but surely, they would also find themselves killing the other race. This was war. There is no right and wrong in it. The only thing that might exist is a sigh of regret. Su Ming lifted his head and watched as the old man with that shrill voice and hatred gradually disappeared. He then lifted his right hand. The berserkers around him roared, and he lowered his hand towards the third layer of protection, for sacred skies. When his palm fell, the 10,000 feet statue of the god of berserkers manifested before him, and it struck the third layer of protection with its palm. As rumbling sounds echoed in the air, wind, rain, thunder, and lightning rose up within that four sacred skies rune before spreading out violently. The berserkers' levels of cultivation were unequal. Once four sacred skies spread out, quite a large number of them immediately coughed up blood. Some of them even collapsed and died. But there was an even larger number of berserkers who charged past Su Ming with red eyes, as if they had gone mad, and rushed towards the rune. This was not Su Ming's battle alone. This was the battle of all berserkers. The immortals within the 18 mountains of Sky Mist Dao watched the sky quietly with pale faces under the rune's protection. Despair took hold of them, for the shadow of death was descending on them. Once the rune shattered, the only thing that would await them was death. Chapter 7:10. There will always be sacrifices, and there will always be those who want to live. Sky Mist Dao's third rune rumbled, and those rumbling sounds from four sacred skies continued violently without stop. This rune might be incredibly powerful, and the four great laws of wind, rain, lightning, and thunder might be able to gather up an endless amount of destructive power as they changed. But no matter how limitless that destructive power was, it could not overcome the madness of 500,000 people. Theirs was a reckless battle, and it was a form of counterattack in the mid of their uprising, born from hatred for immortals. The rune lasted for a moment, and that so-called infinite amount of destruction did not last too long either. Quite a number of berserkers died, but they died willingly. They were dying for their own people, for the berserkers' uprising. They died without regrets. Su Ming did not stop the berserkers from getting injured or getting killed as they fought against the immortals, because this was for their own uprising. If he forcefully called a stop to the berserkers' attack and attacked Sky Mist Dao's rune himself, perhaps with his power, he could break open Sky Mist Dao's mountain gate. But if he did that, then this war would no longer be the berserkers and the immortals' battle. Instead, it would be Su Ming against the immortals. If that came to be the case, then berserkers would not be able to continue with their uprising. Even if there was any form of rise in power, it would still be Su Ming's uprising, not that of the berserkers. A race's uprising required fresh blood, sacrifices, and a will. Su Ming looked at the madness within his people's red eyes. The only thing he could do was to lead them and break open the runes with them. Su Ming took a step forward. As his power of life matrix circulated in his body, he lifted his foot and took a swift step forward. The world immediately roared, and a huge foot appeared in the sky. It was the god of Berserker's 7 steps. The foot stepped on Sky Mist Dao's 4 sacred skies rune 7 times in a row. The rune shuddered, and an endless amount of berserkers charged forward madly. With their bodies, their flesh, and their power, and everything else within them, they crashed into the rune. A loud boom erupted into the sky. As that sound burst into the air, tens of thousands of berserkers died, but the 4 sacred skies rune also shattered. Once it did, only one last defensive rune remained between the immortals and the berserkers: 4 seasons destruction. This rune was incredibly terrifying. It did not have any concrete attacks and could not destroy any souls. It only had a power to make spring move towards winter. It could make a person transform in the way the 4 seasons would and move from life to death. With the same amount of life offered, it could extinguish the flames in a person's life. Sky Mist Dao disciples, we are immortals. Even if we die, we will die as we kill berserkers. Only this sort of death will allow our souls to return to our homeland. If we die in humiliation and let these savage barbarians break our rune, then our deaths will have no value. At the instant 4 sacred skies crumbled, the sect master of the Sky Mist Dao branch in the land of berserkers, a middle-aged man with a sullen face, rose up in midair and looked at all the disciples within the 18 mountains. His gaze gradually turned gentle, and a hint of a reluctance to part appeared in his eyes. I don't want to die, but if Sky Mist Dao is going to fall, if the rune crumbles and we will all have to face death without exception, then I wish that I will die a worthy death. I wish that my death will make these savages in Yin Death region pay a devastating price. I wish that my death will lessen the sacrifices for our army in the land of immortals when they come here to avenge us. I am not a kind-hearted person, but at this moment, I wish that my death would be worth it. Who among you is willing to die a worthy death with me? The middle-aged man's voice was rousing. At the instant he said those words, he lifted his head and looked at the final rune up ahead, then took a step towards Sky Mist Dao's 4 seasons destruction. At the instant he took that step forward, his physical body started rapidly withering away, and at the moment he closed in on the rune, his body turned into a pile of bones that fell apart. However, all his flesh, blood, and nascent divinity gathered together and flew out of that pile of bones, fusing into the 4 seasons destruction with a bang. Sky Mist Dao's final rune is called 4 seasons destruction because it will be incredibly difficult to destroy as long as there were those who were willing to offer up their lives to take another's. There will only be dead souls in Sky Mist Dao, no survivors in our sect who will be waiting for you. I still have 4,800 something years of life in me, who will come and exchange their lives with me. The sect master's voice reverberated through the air and spread through the entire area inside the rune as well as the area beyond. Even the berserkers outside stopped moving. Su Ming stood right at the front. When he looked over and sensed the determination within the immortals that would rather descend into madness and die than give up, he had to admit that even though he despised and loathed this race, there were respectable aspects within each race. I still have 700 something years of life left. Who will exchange their lives with me? A person flew out from one of the 18 mountains in Sky Mist Dao and charged towards that 4 seasons destruction rune. I still have 100 something years of life left. I still have 2,200 something years of life. I have 400 something years of life. I have 600 something years of life. One voice after another rose continuously from the 18 mountains in Sky Mist Dao, and groups of people charged swiftly towards the 4 seasons destruction rune. In the blink of an eye, those voices became even more frequent and eventually fused together to become Sky Mist Dao's cry. I still have 500 years of life, Wula whispered softly and fused into the rune. In silence, Qian Lan Yu lifted her head and took a step forward towards the rune. Qian Lan Meng bit her bottom lip, and just as she was about to move forward in anguish, the departing Qian Lan Yu suddenly turned her head around, and before Qian Lan Meng could even react to her, Qian Lan Yu had already lifted her right hand and swung at her sister. A white layer of fog spread out. Chen Lan Meng gradually closed her eyes in the fog and fell to the side. Live a good life. Chen Lan Yu whispered softly and turned around to take a step towards the rune in the sky. When almost every single person in Sky Mist Dao offered up their lives, a blinding light erupted from the Four Seasons Destruction rune. That light came from all directions and concentrated right before the berserkers. The low roars and declarations that they would exchange a life for a life symbolized the immortals' counterattack. It also made the bloodthirsty berserkers fall silent for a moment. But it only lasted for a moment before all the berserkers took a step forward. A presence that suppressed all things swept through the land, and the berserkers charged into the circle of light that would take their lives in exchange for the immortals. Su Ming did not move back. He took a step into that circle of light together with his people. This was a battle that had no plots, no schemes, and no ploys. This was a crazed battle of sacrificing a life for a life. If the immortals could do it, then berserkers would give the same response. As loud booming sounds rang in the air and both sides fought using their lives, the bodies of all Sky Mist Dao disciples withered away once they gave up all their years. But this was not the end. Their nascent divinities self-destructed as their bodies collapsed so that they could bring forth even greater destruction with the power contained in their explosions. The berserkers were the same. This was a battle that had no right or wrong, no logic or reasoning. This was a crazed battle that sacrificed a life for a life. As more people died, the battle gradually came to an end. Tens of thousands of immortals collapsed dead. When the sect master disappeared, when Wu La's soul with its anguish scattered into nothingness, when all the immortals gave up their everything for the sake of killing at least one more berserker, the battle that sacrificed a life for a life ended. Once the last immortal in the rune died, the light from the Four Seasons destruction gradually faded away and disappeared into the world. Su Ming stood in midair at that moment. As of then, nearly 70,000 berserkers had died. Half of them were lost due to this sacrifice of life for a life. The entire battlefield sank into silence. They are warriors. Even if our hatred towards them burns the sky, they were still warriors. They deserve respect, Su Ming said slowly. His voice reverberated through the battlefield, falling into each of the berserkers' ears. Sky Mist Dao was destroyed. However, within all races and all sects, if there were those who were courageous enough to sacrifice their own lives, then there would naturally be those who were cowards. At that moment, there were a couple hundred of these people still remaining among the 18 mountains of Sky Mist Dao. They were the ones who had not given up their lives earlier. Once the Four Seasons destruction rune disappeared and the sky was filled with berserkers, these hundreds of people walked out while trembling, then prostrated themselves on the ground towards the berserkers and Su Ming. We are willing to change our blood inheritance and worship the god of berserkers as berserkers from now on. These hundreds of people prayed as they trembled, and their words pleading for survival traveled through the AIs. Yu Ming did not bother about these people. There would naturally be those who would enslave them and make them secondary citizen slaves in all but name among the berserkers. Su Ming's gaze fell on a person lying unconscious on the ground within one of the 18 mountains. He walked over silently and arrived next to the unconscious Chen Lan Meng. He looked at her silently, and a hint of nostalgia as well as complicated feelings appeared on his face. Su Ming closed his eyes. Sometime later, when he opened them, he said flatly, "Kai Li Qian." Immediately, a long arc charged through the sky and landed behind him. It was Kai Li Qian. His heart was trembling slightly, but he dared not show a single hint of it on his face. Instead, he only showed zealous respect as he knelt down on one knee toward Su Ming. "I, Kai Li Qian, am here. I took away half of your lightning crystal in the past," Su Ming said slowly. When he uttered these words, Kai Li Qian's heart let out a thump in his chest, and an awkward look as well as a wry smile appeared on his face. "Today, I will give Sky Mist Dao's ruins to your tribe. Make it the foundation for your tribe to grow strong." Su Ming turned around and looked towards the man. Kai Li Qian was momentarily stunned, then excitement instantly filled him. He bowed towards Su Ming once again. "Thank you for your gift, God of Berserkers. Stay here for the time being. The rest of you, come with me, and we will wipe out Hidden Dragon Sect." Su Ming turned around and walked towards the sky. The hundreds of thousands of berserkers around him roared and turned into a long arc as they charged into the distance with Su Ming at the front. Kai Lei Qian lifted his head and looked towards the berserker army that was leaving into the distance. He was also looking at Su Ming as he traveled at the front, while in his ears were the words Su Ming had told to him before he left. "That woman is an old friend of mine. Let her stay and don't harm her."